Don't miss the biggest show of the summer, Kings of the West, starring Bone Thugs and Harmony, E40, Too Short, Mac 10, The Dog Pound, DJ Quick, Sugar Free, and Khadijah, live July 11th at Wells Fargo Arena. Don't miss Kings of the West with Bone Thugs and Harmony, E40, Too Short, DJ Quick, Mac 10, The Dog Pound, Sugar Free, and Khadijah. Get tickets now at HighVTix.com.
Iowa Fireworks Farm is Iowa's largest fireworks store. 6,000 square feet of hand-picked fireworks, over 50 brands, and 1,300 different products to choose from. But they're also family-owned and operated. Iowa Fireworks Farm is the one stop you need to make before July 4th. You'll find them just south of the Metro. Take I-35 to exit 43 at New Virginia. Head east and look for the Big Red Barn. At Iowa Fireworks Farm, the toughest part will be deciding what not to buy.
Scott Dochterman, Chad Leistikow. Together on one pod, talking odds and all things Big Ten. Powered by GameDay Men's Health, with locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, and North Liberty. From the Channel Seed Studios, this is Legends and Listeners. Exclusively on Iowa Everywhere.
Hey, Hawkeye fans, Big Ten fans, and Iowans everywhere. It is Legends and Listeners on Iowa Everywhere, coming at you on this Tuesday from the Channel Seed Studios. I'm heading out on vacation very soon, so we're doing an early week show for you guys. I feel like you guys are going to get mad at this show for a while, but then you're going to be happier at the end. So stick with us. Chad Leistikow of the Des Moines Register, Scott Dochterman of The Athletic. This is our 98th episode, Scott. Horse Latitudes special today, Scott.
Well, you need these once in a while. It's kind of fun to revisit some of the things from our youth and what we've covered. And I think when you look at the list of things, it's the best of times and worst of times here with Iowa Athletics. So, once we get past the music playing, we will certainly be able to give you a list of the first one, which I think will be a little bit of pain before the pleasure.
We did tease on last week's show that it would be some Brussels sprouts and steak. We're going to get the vegetables out of the way first. But first of all, Scott, before we start, Horse Latitudes. I know a lot of people may not know what that is. I didn't really have a super great sense of what it is. I just know it's a mark. Did Mark coin it? Mark Morehouse coin it? Or do you guys kind of together, obviously, called it the Horse Latitudes? It feels like a Morehouse term to me.
Oh, it's definitely a Morehouse term.
Okay, that's what I thought.
Yeah, Mark's all about that. It was, what was it? Was it from the doors, like looking out at the horizon, where the horizon meets the ocean, and it's just kind of out there. And so he was called from like May through late July, early August, the Horse Latitude. So when we used to do the On Iowa podcast for several years there, that's what we would do is plug our time. We used to have like these moratoriums, and it was always
I remember that because I was a listener. Yeah,
there were two topics that we were like, all right, we're shutting it down. This is a moratorium. One was, we're not going to talk about what, that they should shut down the Cyhawk anymore.
Right.
We'll let you have one episode a year where we talk about that. And the other one was the succession plans to Kirk Ferentz.
Right, which is still ongoing. Yeah,
I know.
It's a good thing he didn't do it.
I know. I talked to him today, and unlike some people have reported, he has no plans to step down before the regular season. So, which I know somebody who had way better information than us, Chad, and a lot of people came at us as like, can you confirm this? And I'm like, I'm not even giving it the dignity of responding. If you don't hear it from me, or you don't hear it from Chad or somebody like maybe Tom Caker, then just don't listen. But anyway, I don't have a succession plan for Kirk yet. We started those like 10 plus years ago.
Yeah, I guess before we get to the Horse Latitudes part, was there any news of the week or anything that I know? Whatever you can tell, if you can't, whatever. I know you're interviewing Kirk Ferentz today. We're recording this on Monday.
Yeah, I talked to Kirk. I wouldn't say that there's really any news per se. I mean, just that I guess I can put it out there that he's, no plans to retire anytime soon anyway. But he also said, I don't know how I'll feel when I'm 75. He goes, I've never been 70 before, so I don't know. Which is such a Kirk thing to say. I did have several hours with George Barnett, and I tell you what, when you look at the way that offensive line blocked last year, which we knew, but when you could really see it on the all-22 and some of the things that they were able to do, just about anybody could run behind that. And I'm not saying Caleb Johnson did not have a great year. He did, absolutely. But that was as good of a blocking year as ever in the running game. So it's probably 02 anyway.
Especially when they didn't have a pass game. You do have to kind of appreciate that. And I'm looking forward to whatever you produce off of that interview for sure. As I head to vacation, you guys can catch a Phil Parker interview on my Hawk Central show, which comes out Wednesday. So Scott and I have you covered even if we're not here. So we got the offense and defense covered, right, Scott?
Yeah.
So anyway, I looked up horse latitudes, and this is what I came up with on the internet, just so you guys know what it is. It's kind of a morbid thing, actually. The horse latitudes are areas of calm, high pressure, and relatively windless air around 30 degrees north and south of the equator. The name comes from sailors on ships traveling to the Americas in the 18th and 19th centuries who would sometimes throw horses overboard to conserve water when their ships were becalmed in these regions. So there was, it has to do with horse sacrifice. Nonetheless, good old Morehouse with the terms. It was to conserve water because sailors, needed the water. So and the horses drank a lot of the water. So and also lessened the weight on board.
Is that how we got water polo?
That I don't know. But that is where the term horse latitudes became associated with these areas of the country. So there you go.
Okay. Well,
all right. So to the horse latitudes we go. This would be called. These are the. We're going to call them gut punches, but if you want to go a little lower, you could call them that as well. And so we're going to talk about it's kind of fans. Part of being a fan is like having pain. That's what one really good friend of mine kind of taught me that. He was a long time Baltimore Orioles fan, and he would always say, put it in the pain bank, like when your team doesn't come through, whatever. And I definitely could relate to that as a lifelong Cubs fan. And then when that pain bank pays off, when you get the World Series or whatever you get, then that celebration is that much more joyous, I guess, right, Scott? I mean, that's kind of, so it's not like we're going through this to be cruel or whatever, but it's just sort of like the pain that has been of being a Hawk fan. And then we'll get to the end where we're going to get to some of the butt kickings, the most memorable butt kickings. But we're going to start with gut punches or nut punches, depending on how you want to term it.
The pain and then the pleasure here. I think, gut punches, heartbreakers, if you want to be really nice, nut punches. But they're the games that just really, you grit your teeth and you just, they really draw some pain, and nobody likes a loss, so every loss has its own value, I suppose, but these are the ones that just they left a mark on Iowa's fan psyche, and there's some that people still haven't gotten over, I would say, to some extent.
For sure.
And then the flip side, the ass kickers, these are the games that stand out, and they're just, we all know what number one is going to be. When you go to the Woodshed, you have a pretty good idea. We're not going to rank those necessarily. We're just going to bring them up, but it's simply, those are the payoffs. Those are the games that you really just are,
those are the payoffs, partially.
Yeah. You want to relive them, and they're all. That's not to be confused with greatest wins, not at all.
Right.
I mean, those are in a different category. So today we wanted to go with the gut punches, the ones that just tear your guts out. And as you said, being a Cubs fan, we had, I don't know, up until 2016, every year, and there was
pretty
something
much.
like that. As a Bears fan,
it's building. The pain bank is building. Yeah.
Bears fan had a few, but I've been more like pissed off at them than I have been, now 87 was probably the one that with Walter Payton's last game. That would have been my Bears memory of a little bit of pain in that point, but the rest of them have been like I say expletives at them, and that's about it.
All right. So how we're going to do this is, Scott and I, there's a lot. Like I've gone through. Anyway, there's a lot. We boiled it down to our top 10s, but we don't know each other's top 10s. So we're just going to kind of reveal what we've got from 10 to 1. Not going to spend 10 minutes on each thing, but it might bring up, I don't know, some good stories. Who knows? So I'll let you go first, Scott. What do you have number 10? Biggest gut punch moments, I guess, in Hawkeye athletics. And I guess we're terming this probably more in our era. I mean, there's one on my list that predates me, but stuff we know about. I'm not going back to the 30s here.
Yeah, I probably wouldn't do any like 1960 football on this one, but there is one in that category. But I mean, needless to say, I'm not going to go there. Right. This one is 2013 Big Ten tournament quarterfinal on a Friday night in Chicago. It was the late game. Yep. And Iowa had a double-digit lead for much of the second half and then got Teddy V'd. Some of the calls were, I will say this, that I've seen some games where the officiating was rough. This was really bad. And this was Michigan State beating Iowa 59-56. And probably the call that stands out for me was Derek Nix taking about 3, 4, maybe even 5 steps in the lane and barging into Zach McCabe, who only had his arm straight up, and then made the basket and got the foul. And what made this painful at the time, and it's probably faded over time now, but that was how. If Iowa wins that game, they go to the NCAA tournament. And they hadn't been in the NCAA tournament since 2006. And that was the build of Fran McCaffrey's era. That was, year 3. They were really they had some really good games, and they just reached that point where everybody in the arena knew, and everybody coaching and everybody playing knew, Iowa wins, they're in the tournament. Iowa loses, they're not in the tournament. And so to have that game kind of taken from them, I thought, and the culmination of it was Teddy V didn't officiate an Iowa game for multiple years because of that. And I did talk to Rick Boyages at the Big Ten. He's like, we decided to wait a couple of years before he did it again because it was just such a rough game.
Yeah, that's one of those where I was sports editor at the time of the Register, but I remember watching that game, so I remember exactly where I was. And it was just that was a tough one to watch because it just felt like the officials took over, and it was Izzo and Teddy V against Iowa. And you wonder, Scott, because that 13 team ends up going to the NIT finals. I mean, obviously, everybody now in 2025 can laugh at the NIT, but back then there was a lot of excitement for that NIT run. There was, and who knows? If maybe that team makes the Sweet 16. You could have a different trajectory of how we remember the Fran McCaffrey era, and I'm not blaming it on that, but that is a good one because it was a gut punch, and it was a costly one, Scott. It was, a tangible cost and potentially of the McCaffrey era.
And they had good players. I mean,
right.
Aaron White and Roy Devin Marble, Eric May was a good player. They had a lot of players. And I think more than ever, especially when it comes to NCAA tournament basketball, that if you get a good draw, you can go far. And that was a good enough team. That was one of the best, 68 teams in the country for sure. Yeah. And if it gets in, has the right draw, maybe it's a 10 seed, maybe it's 11 seed, wins a game, maybe wins 2, then we're talking about a completely different era. Now, the era is the era, but I'll say this, that game, and I remember talking years later to Andrew Francis, who was one of the assistants then, to Zach McCabe, who was there, and it was like, dude, I don't even want to talk about it. It really bothered them, and I get it.
So number 2, I don't actually have that on my list, but it was one I considered. Okay. So that tells us how tough these kicks are, and they're going to get worse.
They're going to get worse.
Yeah, and speaking of kicks, this one's a fake punt, Scott. 2010, Wisconsin, Iowa football. This is another one where I was out in D.C. at the time, and so I wasn't working or anything. So I definitely remember where I was. You're up 30-24. just an unbelievable. I know you've written about this for The Athletic too, just how much NFL talent was on that field. That 2010 team, so much hype around that Hawkeye team that brought so many people back, and really just a great game. And of course, the 4th and 10 fake punt that essentially everybody still remembers. Runs up the middle of the field. They go score a touchdown. Where they like leap over the pile and just barely got in, right?
It was Monte Ball. It was a twisting touchdown.
Yeah.
And as soon as he crossed the line, I mean, bam, bam. I think it was Micah Hyde and Tyler Sash kind of converged on him, and the ball fell out. And so when they went to review, they initially listed him short of the goal line. Then, they were worried that he actually fumbled. And I remember talking to Monte Ball the next year. He's like, the only reason why he was playing was because James White was hurt. And he's like, here's a guy with 79 touchdowns or something like that. He's like, if I fumbled the ball, then I'd probably never play again, not for Wisconsin. And so he twisted, he made it, it was 31-30. JJ Watt only made 2 real big plays, 2 plays, but they were both really big. He blocked an extra point, and then he had a sack of Stanzi, which, set him back a little bit on that final drive. But, here some of the particulars. And by the way, this is my number 9, so we'll just bleed into your number 8 after this.
Perfect, yeah.
Yeah. 31-30, Wisconsin. There were 30 NFL draft picks that played, and 15 for each team. So it was really even. Both left tackles and both right defensive ends were first-round draft picks. There were 8 lead changes in this game. And you want to just talk about and then to top it all off, they're both ranked in the top 15, and it was the last year they were going to play before Legends and Leaders. So they weren't going to play the next 2 years for sure. And so it felt like this legacy-defining game moment because you didn't know when they were going to play again. And Bielema, and then just like right before the fake punt, Brett Greenwood intercepts a ball like at the 30 of Wisconsin. And that's probably the loudest outburst I've ever heard at Kinnick Stadium. It was 27-24. He intercepts it. Iowa couldn't do anything really with it, kicks a field goal, goes up 6, and then Nortman, and like the play before Nortman, there was like this check down crap ball by Scott Polzine, the quarterback, and it goes for like 3 or 4 yards, but that made it like 4th and 4 instead of like 4th and 9, which is what it was. And because 4th and 9, I don't know if Bielema goes for the fake. 4th and 3, 4th and 4, he did. And I mean, the Red Sea parted. I mean, it's like just Moses was out there, directing traffic, and there was no waves or anything. So the only thing that got him was he tripped over his feet like 25 yards later.
Yeah, and Iowa was 6-0 at the time. They had just come off beating Penn State.
They lost one. They lost one.
Or 6-1, but undefeated in the Big Ten.
Yeah,
had just come off beating Penn State and then at Michigan. Yeah. And so their only loss had been, of course, in the desert. They never do well out west. To Nick Foles and company, right? So that was another freakish game, by the way. Another one where I remember where I was. Yeah. And then the next week there was an ass kicking, which maybe we'll get to later. But that season kind of fell apart toward the end. So without that, that result goes a different way. Certainly, that 2010 season could have gone much differently as well. As you know, ends with loss. That campaign, and then of course the Inside Bowl. But a lot of stories in that 2010 season. We can't get to all of them right now.
Yeah. I would just add that that team was really, really good and had a really difficult schedule and was really close, but some injuries and key plays really cost them. But Chad, since that was my number 9, why don't we go to your number 9 now?
Yeah, 2023. This was a game I covered. Iowa women against LSU in the national championship game, just because obviously Caitlin Clark gets the team to the championship. Iowa was actually favored in that game, and it wasn't so much. I think the gut punch part of it was just there was just a lot to it. Like the. Now I'm blanking on the girl that got really hot for LSU off the bench.
Flo J?
No, well, it was a bench player.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
Why can't I think of it?
It's like a senior, yeah.
Yeah, and but they didn't, because I remember talking to Raina Harmon the next year about that, and it was like, yeah, she was on my scouting report as shooter, and I should have made a bigger deal out of it, and I didn't, and I really regretted it. And then, of course, they beat LSU the next year. But between that and then Caitlin Clark getting some really ticky-tack fouls, I mean, just talk about a precursor to, like, bad officiating. And it was Iowa, you can't blame officiating on that loss. I mean, Iowa loses by 17. And that was another thing that Raina Harmon told me, was that girl that had God, why can't I think of her name? I'll get it.
LaDeja Williams.
She had a red hot. Anyway, she's the one.
Carson.
Yeah.
Jasmine Carson.
And she never really got her flowers, she said. She deserved to, because of what Angel did after the game and because the officiating, all that overshadowed that. But it was, all in all, it just was kind of like, it was still a great moment. That whole day was a great moment. The entry to the American Airlines Arena, there was so much greatness about that whole weekend. I mean, the win over South Carolina the 2 days before. But just kind of in hindsight now, you just kind of wish, if you're a Hawkeye fan, that had gone a little bit differently. I mean, it's one of those stories, it's kind of like a La Festa Rhodes type thing, where someone just gets hot and you can't control it, and all of a sudden you're down a bunch. And Iowa was coming back. I mean, Caitlin was bringing them back, and then she Sonano got her fourth, and then that's when she flipped the ball behind her back, got the tee, which there's no longer a tee, and so that was Caitlin's fourth, and then it was kind of the wind was out of the sails then, and then we talk about the post game stuff and everything, but a missed opportunity at a championship still was a great, unbelievable memory, but also in hindsight, a little bit of a gut punch that they didn't win that.
Yeah, I actually have that as my number 2. So I'll just kind of add a little bit to it. I watched this game on my phone in Japan. I was on there on a family vacation, and I figured, well, I kind of got to watch this. So it was like 3:30 in the morning when that game was going on. And, so we got up and watched it. I think the thing that felt the worst wasn't just that they lost. And I think that losing by 17, it's not like, oh, if this, we want to give them their credit. They deserve it that LSU won. But I think it was just the officials. And the what I felt like was, you remember the movie Remember the Titans, and Denzel Washington's walking up the sidelines, and Mr. Official, can I talk to you? If you want to stay in this game, coach. And that's kind of what it felt like watching Lisa Bluter trying to talk and not getting anywhere. And then you look over on the other sideline and out on the court in the middle of the game and nothing getting called, So I think the frustration that I think most fans would have, it's yes, like I did not have the South Carolina loss on this list because I just felt they were beaten by a better team. Whereas with this one, it felt like they really did have a chance, but they were playing against some things out of their control. And that, and yes, Carson's going crazy from 3 was not not predicted, but anyway.
Jasmine Carson, 7 for 8 from the field, 5 of 6 from 3, 22 points. Off the bench. Yeah, was a very bit player on that team. So
exactly.
And our rankings are obviously, there's no perfect thing, but the reason I kind of had it lower is just because I still feel like it's a good memory, but it also was, the gut punch of the loss. So right. Anyway, go ahead. What do you got? So what do you got for number 9?
I already said it. Wisconsin.
Oh yeah. What do you have at number 8?
Number 8 is 1985 Iowa football versus Ohio State. Mm-hmm. And that was in the rain over in Columbus. And this was Iowa's number 1 for the 3rd or 4th week in a row, something like that. And playing over there, that, as we know, that's a difficult spot for every team but Michigan lately, to go over there to win. And it was the same way then. And I think that was like Keith Byers' only game he played in or something like that year. And 22-13 in the rain. That was the one thing they needed to get past. That was one team they needed to get past to have some sort of a perfection and be number 1 and reach a status they never really have. And they still won the Big Ten that year. Great. And there's another game on this that's a little higher for me. But but then I think this one was one that really just, really lost a chance at kind of immortality for Iowa, So I don't know if you have any memories of that.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute myself. And then the next week they beat Illinois 59-0. So
a good Illinois team that tied Michigan, by the way, that year.
Yeah, right. And so, what did Chuck Long throw? 4 picks that day? Something like that, right?
Yeah.
Let me find the stats here.
Yeah.
Yeah, 4 interceptions. So, just one of and it was raining and all that stuff. But, I mean, Ronnie Harm, looking at the stats, 26 carries, 120 yards. It was just,
they tore down the goalposts after that.
Wow, in Columbus. Wow.
In Columbus, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, no, Iowa was number 1. So, that did derail a potential national championship. So that's a good one. That wasn't on my list, but it probably should have been, honestly.
Yeah. All right. What's your number 8?
Well, I've got a different quarterback moment, and that would be Ricky Stanzi getting sacked and injured in the end zone in 2019 against Northwestern.
That's my 7, so it works.
Okay, so there you go. That one was an undefeated team, Scott, 9-0. And you felt at that point that, because all you had left was, obviously Ohio State was coming, but to set up that big Ohio State game, you were going to, have a chance to be undefeated. And they lose this game the week before that. They were on the cover of SI. Just a tough moment because they were up 10-0. I don't know. I guess, could you do anything differently? Could you call a play differently? I didn't cover that team either. That was kind of in that era. I was still out east, but another magic, kind of like the 85 thing. Kind of a magical season, not cut short completely, but you lose your quarterback for the Ohio State game. And they almost won it anyway the next week, but if you had Stanzi, I might have beat Ohio State maybe. I don't know.
Well, I think it matters in the big picture, Chad, because, I was there. I covered it, and Iowa was rolling early. It was 10-0, and it looked like, okay, this thing's going to snowball on, really quickly. And then you have Ricky Stanzi, kind of taking a bootleg there in the end zone, and getting crushed by Corey Wooten, and his leg turns and he fumbles the ball. So not only do they get hurt, they lose the ball and Northwestern covers it for a touchdown.
Right.
And it just kind of knocks all the wind. It was like a crazy scenario in the stands. And then Iowa was on its heels a little bit at that point. They couldn't offensively. They were very inconsistent in 2009. There's a lot of fond memories with the way that they performed in the clutch, but that year they only averaged 3 yards a carry, despite having a pretty good offensive line. Stanzi was really up and down. He had some amazing moments, and then he had 5 interceptions against Indiana. So in that game, you bring in James Vandenberg, who's only like 9 of 27. Really struggled. And they had a phantom touchdown called back. From a really bad. It was a block. It was a pancake block that they called holding, and there really wasn't no holding on Raphael Eubanks. And they lose 17-10, and they go to 9-1. But if again, you look in the big picture, Chad. If they would have been 10-0, and even if they would have lost exactly the same way at Ohio State the next week, a field goal in overtime, at worst, then they're 11-1, and they get ranked higher. They ended up ranked 7th in the country, which is good, but obviously. But they also get a co-Big Ten championship, and you don't get that with 2 losses. You would have got that with 1, and so anyway, that's
right.
Tough go on that one. So what's
so that was my 8, and that was your 7.
So what's your 7?
My 7, we go to 2017, Scott, and Kinnick Stadium, electric game in Iowa City. Saquon Barkley hurdling people. What a game. Iowa nearly, Josie Jewell, swings the bat off the pick against Trace Missouri. I mean, that game had Akram Wadley with the 2 really impressive touchdowns. Nate Stanley had a really nice TD toss to Nick Easley. Penn State nearly 600 yards, but Iowa has them down 19-15 until the last play of the game. 19-15 score. 4th down and goal, and Monty Hooker, an inch? His fingers are probably an inch from tipping that ball, and Juwan Johnson catches it for a walk-off touchdown. Kinnick went from crazy loud to instantly silent. It was very, as far as like a game ending goes, that was about as heart-wrenching as you could get. I feel like you can't really get much worse than that, unless it's like unless it's a Hail Mary against the Commanders and you're the Bears. But anyway.
Yeah. Well, Barkley put up 358 all-purpose yards. I think it ranks, it's top 10 in Big Ten history, and that was as great of an individual performance. Honestly, I think it was a better one that I saw than Christian McCaffrey in the Rose Bowl a couple years before that, because I thought with Barkley, he was going against Iowa's best. McCaffrey was going against Iowa that was kind of bled out in the Big Ten championship, which we'll get to later. And so it was just not a good day for Iowa. I thought this one, Iowa was at a fever pitch. We know what that place is like at night against a top 5 team. It's a steel cage match at Kinnick. You lock the door and line up the gates, and you say, all right, it's 4-quarter fist fight here, boys. And that's what it was that night. And that was a gut punch. I agree with that totally. So, ultimately the season, was what, 8-5 season, counting a bowl win.
Right. So. Yeah. Right. It didn't quite have the impact, like big picture of some, like the fake punt and the Stanzi injury, obviously. But as far as it was like Kinnick was just like on fire that night, was ready to celebrate against the top team, and then air came right out at the end. So, So I take it that wasn't on your list.
That was not on the list.
Okay. All right. So what do you got?
I think it was one of the best games I've seen.
Yeah. Right.
I'm going to go number 6 here. I'm going to switch sports to go to basketball. Mm-hmm. And I'll start off by saying that Iowa basketball historically has gotten socked in the midsection and below more than any of the other sports.
Most of my top 5 is basketball.
Yeah, it's just like, And this one is 1970, before both of us were born, against Jacksonville in the de facto Sweet 16. Pembroke Burroughs the third, with a tip in to win 104-103. This, you don't want to. If you ever wanted to go, hey, what was the best Iowa basketball team? This one should be up in that category because they're 14-0 in the Big Ten. They played 14 games. They still have the Big Ten record for average points per game at 102.3 or 102.9, something like that. And this is, downtown Freddie Brown and John Johnson who played. You had a really amazing team. This was a team that was built to go the distance. This was a team that could have taken on UCLA and competed and maybe even won the national title. And but it didn't play a lot of defense either. But that's what happens when you have the Rick Mount game from earlier that year and you win 108-107. This is, to me, this is before us, Chad. This is our parents' generation when they were growing up. But that's where I have this one is Jacksonville.
Yeah, I had that number 5 actually, and that was I consulted with a couple veteran Hawkeye fans, and one person I talked to that remembered the game was said it was a little bit of a fluky winning shot, like I couldn't find video on it, but like it was sort of like almost like a tip in the buzzer type thing, So that hurt. And that was the Artis Gilmore, right? Was on their team. So that was again, I don't have a memory of that, but another one of those things where you could have gone a long ways. So for sure. My number 6 was actually the COVID-19 pandemic cutting short NCAA wrestling. I remember because Iowa was set to finally dethrone Penn State that year. everything lined up. Spencer Lee, everybody was rolling, coming out of Big Ten, and it was finally going to be the year they were going to take down Cale Sanderson and company. Heading to Minneapolis, I was ready to go. I had my credentials, and then everything, obviously, as we all know, stopped in mid-March of 2020. Never got to contest the 2020 NCAA Wrestling Championships. That was a juggernaut Iowa team that would have won the title. It was just like a season celebration that was going to happen. And, I'm not going to say it. They did get the title the next year. It didn't quite feel the same. But they needed it. They needed to get it. But it just felt like that if they had wrestled in 2020, then I was probably going to win back-to-back. Who knows what kind of program momentum Tom Brands and company had. But as it turned out, you only get the one title out of that, and then Penn State comes back better than ever. It would have been fun to kind of see those, maybe Iowa go on a little run there and see what kind of momentum they could have built up from the Spencer Lee era. Obviously, some of those guys got all their years back, but at the same time, it was I kind of wanted to throw wrestling on here, and I felt like, basically got the title stripped away from them. They'll never be the 2020 national champions, and they would have been. And so that goes, that's tough. That's tough to swallow if you're Tom Brands, I'm sure.
Yeah.
And all those guys, every single person on that team, would have loved to have had a chance to hold the trophy together that year. Now they won it the next year with Spencer Lee with no ACLs, but it wasn't like a dominating performance. It was good, but anyway.
Yeah.
COVID.
You're right.
COVID.
There's a lot of COVID there, and I would say Spencer Lee, I don't know if you have any more wrestling, but him losing his final match was probably pretty tough
for
too.
Sure. Yeah, you could pair those. I didn't put a singular match on there, but that's true.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, my number 5. This cuts. This was when we were little, but still we'll probably remember, and that's the 1980 Final Four Iowa Louisville game where.
Yep.
What's the line out of that? If Ronnie Lester could have only stayed healthy, wouldn't have gotten hurt. He was going shot for shot, basically with Darryl Griffith. They lose in the Final Four, 80-72. I remember talking to Lute Olson a couple of different times, and he said it every single time. If he stays healthy, we win the national title. And
that's a tough one to swallow. I had that 3, by the way, number 3.
Okay, all right. So, do you remember much of that? Honestly, I'll be honest with you. I think it was a little bit before my time.
I do, but very limited. Most of it's 95% of it's on, video.
Yeah, right.
But I do remember, I remember the excitement in my house when they beat Georgetown the week before. And so there was, it wasn't like I was into that game, but I just remember like that was a big moment. And that was probably my first real introduction to Hawkeye sports. I would have been barely 6 years old. So what I remember about it anyway.
Kindergarten.
So, yes. Yeah. 1980, right?
Yeah, it came right after Miracle on Ice.
Right. There you go.
Couple weeks later.
Yeah. So, I was 6. So, vague memories. But I remember this 81 football season. So, that's what I mean. Like this was like my very first foggy Iowa memory. But I've watched the video, and Lester was dominating early. Yeah. I mean, think about that. A potential national championship taken by an injury. And he was, it was a great story that he came back that year.
Yeah. And as we know, Chad, this is where it goes from being punches in the gut to punches a little farther south. And I think this is where this one lines up, is the factor of, maybe you do win the national title with him.
Right.
And, so that was my number 5. What where are you at right now?
That was my 3. But speaking of health, Scott, GameDay Men's Health can get you back in the game. Maybe it can get Ronnie Lester back on the court to face Louisville with some quick testosterone replacement therapy. Who knows? Game Day Men's Health can help you feel like you're in your 20s again. With those T shots, testosterone replacement therapy, among other things, is what they're good at. They help you figure out the dose you need and get you where you need to go for your performance in any part of life, whether that's your mood, athletically, any energy. I mean, that's probably the biggest thing I notice is just the energy I have every single day. And if you're on vacation like me next week, you can get a to-go shot. And so I've got mine packed away in my toiletries bag, ready to go. So it's even if you're on vacation, they take care of you. So get connected with Game Day Men's Health for a private, no obligation, free consultation at GameDayMen'sHealth.com or stop by one of the locations in Ankeny, West Des Moines, or North Liberty. Just can't say enough of how thankful I am that Game Day Men's Health is in my life. So hope you guys get involved in that too.
I can only echo it, Chad. You know, I have mine on Monday mornings, and it's always a good Monday when I can go in there and say hi to Alicia and everybody else there. They do great things, and I feel better than I have in 25 years, and hopefully look better than I have in 25 years.
Yeah.
You know, so that's what it does for you. And if it helps me, you know, look at least presentable these days, then hopefully it'll help you too.
So let's see. I was my numbers are I just want to make sure we got everything covered here. I believe I'm on 4 because Lester was my 3.
Okay.
Jacksonville was my 5. COVID was my 6. So,
okay.
Yeah, COVID was 6. Jacksonville 5. Lester was 3, but I haven't revealed my 4, which I cheated a little bit. Mostly it's the 2006 Northwestern State game, but I said NCAA tournament shockers, and I lumped Richmond in there just a little bit. That wasn't that doesn't really qualify, but I feel like it has to be mentioned. But the 2006 exit, both times after they win the Big Ten tournament, 06 and 22 against a team they should beat. And I remember just speaking of the 2022, and I'm not ranking that one as 4. I'm just lumping it in. But the 2022 bracket, Iowa was the 5 seed. It was made to finally get to the Sweet 16. That bracket was made from Providence was the 4, I believe. South Dakota State was the 13. A lot of people thought South Dakota State would actually win that game. And Richmond had just gotten in by winning the A-10 tournament. So they weren't even like some real great mid-major or anything like that. And Iowa just laid an egg, plain and simple. And that was another one of those that could have gone to the Sweet 16. But going back to the 06, I mean, that was, you can't lose to a 14 seed, especially like that. And that was it's too bad because that team was, you know, Bruner, Horner, Haluska, like they had given Iowa fans so many really nice memories. They had just won the Big Ten tournament, and to go down in that way on a 3-point shot at the end, I mean, just talk about completely souring that season. Like that's what you remember from that season, you know. And it's not the 25 wins, the Big Ten tournament. It feels like that one really, that took the Alford era in a really south direction. And it obviously was over the next year.
I think they had a real similar effect for that and from the McCaffrey era in some ways. And when you look, Chad, at a couple of that is byproduct that Northwestern State, they were up, 17 in the second half and blew it. And they're coming off the, winning the Big Ten tournament. They were number 2 in the Big Ten that year. So they were a good team, and they were only a game out of winning the championship. And so, and it wasn't really a surprise when they won the Big Ten championship because they looked like they might have been the best team in the Big Ten that year.
Right.
And then to fall apart the way they did late. And the sad part is they were just getting over the really bad cloud of Pierre Pierce. Mm-hmm. And this was a quality group of, Iowans playing, and right. You have, Horner and Haluska and Bruner. And you felt like, this was a team of Iowa playing for Iowa that was kind of moving things forward. And now it's just kind of instantly forgotten. Like, you don't even exist anymore. And that's really sad. And I would say that, kind of along the same lines. I mean, we could throw in so many of these different close losses in the tournament to, you mentioned the 22 one where, again, Fran McCaffrey finally punches through and wins something of what, of value, in the Big Ten tournament. And then you go out and you lay an egg. It ended any momentum that program had at that point. And then you look at, you can kind of lump in. This is why I was mentioning Iowa basketball, and there's one more on the list that is pretty high for me. But
that's one for me.
Yeah, it's one for me too. But 79, they lose by 2 points to Toledo in the NCAA tournament. 81. Yeah, 81. They lose to Wichita State by 4. They lose to Idaho in 82 by 2 points. They lose to Villanova in the Sweet 16 in 83 by 1. And that's ultimately the game that ended up sending Lute Olson out to Arizona because they miss free throws and they lose by 1 point to Villanova in 83. And
I was at that game, Kemper Arena
in Kansas City. So the heartbreak and the pops below the belt for men's basketball is just astronomical. It's off the charts.
The pain bank, folks, it's building.
It's
no, but yeah, though that Northwestern State loss at the buzzer, basically, for 3-pointer, you're up to. Yeah. I mean, Iowa basketball just went in the tank. Yeah. I mean, went to garbage in 07, and then. They
were like they were this year.
Licklider. Yeah, right.
They were like 17-14, and they didn't win the tournament. And Alford left, and then Licklider, just hit a trap door, and it was bad. But I mean, it's
those losses matter. Yeah, just like you said, 2022. Just think of the momentum that could have been channeled in a different direction there. I
mean, if they go to the Sweet 16 in 2022, Fran's still a coach.
Yeah.
Because fans wanted to buy in,
That's the point. Yeah, that's the point of this.
But it's hard to buy in when it's the same damn result every single year.
Yeah,
and it's like and you got to sports is as much about anything. It's about selling hope and you've got to be able to make people believe that you have a chance to do something this year.
Yeah,
and if you think it's just going to be the same old, and then it is the same old, then that's when deterioration happens. And unfortunately,
that was my 4. Was that on your list or no?
No.
No, it wasn't on your list.
My number 4 took place 10 years ago this year in Indianapolis, Indiana, and that was Iowa football's 12-0 season against Michigan State in the Big Ten championship game, 22-play drive that lasted more than 9 minutes. And that 16-13, and that was as grueling and as physical of a game as I've ever experienced, pro or college. You could feel the hits up in the press box, and we're up in the upper deck, and it was just every single play was contested with so much physicality. It's really hard to replicate. And I wrote a story the next summer, talking to both D'Antonio and Ferentz and saying, I think you guys just took too much out of each other. And then they're like, oh, no, you're fine, blah, blah, blah. And then a few years later, they're both saying, yeah, you're right. But, I mean, that touchdown by L.J. Scott was you want to take one play, singular play, and, and then there's
Bud Spears right there going low. You got to go high. He went low. He knocked out Jordan Lomax's knee, who tore an MCL, and then still tried to play in the Rose Bowl. And there it is. Sorry, folks. I'm really sorry about this.
Aiden, I know you're an Iowa State guy. So get the thing off the screen.
Cut. It's like graphic scenes.
Yeah.
We have to make an R rating now.
Yeah, I know. It's like the Zapruder film here. But now that one, I was just, as I mentioned, I was just over at Kinnick, and I was talking to somebody over there, and I said that was Jack Plum. I talked to him because he's an analyst now, and I somehow brought that up, and I said that was the most devastated I've ever seen a football team after a loss. They were so exhausted and wiped out. And even the next day, where they get an invite to the Rose Bowl, and you could tell they
were spent. Yeah.
you know,
And we probably didn't maybe give that enough credence when we analyzed that Rose Bowl matchup. But I remember Stanford was favored by like 6.5. So
yeah,
Vegas knew probably what was going on.
yeah. That had a pretty good
Blowout was coming.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They had a pretty good running back.
Yeah, pretty good. That was my number 2. So, that was, never forget that. Obviously, covering that was Rick Brown's last game as registered columnist on the Hawkeyes beat, and then I took over for him after that. I was the beat reporter at the time, but so that was quite the way for him to go out. Quite a final game.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was. I remember rushing down and to the media room like in the middle of that drive because we had to file, for the paper and wanted to get quotes, and it was just a crazy ending. Just so close on so many occasions. I mean, if you just watch that drive, I don't encourage anyone to watch that drive, but like so many like fingertips that, ball, like I feel like there's a third down pass that was like just slipped through maybe Lomax's hands or kind of like, and then there's the Connor Cook run.
Yeah.
Anyway, that was my number 2. So do you have one? You had LSU 2. So is there one that's still up there that we haven't mentioned for you?
I
That's not
have
one?
3 and 1. Do you have anything left?
No, 1. Yeah, 1.
You just have 1 left?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I'll throw 3 out there, which was the 1985 Rose Bowl against UCLA.
Mm-hmm.
And what hurt was, Iowa hasn't had kind of that. Hasn't really had a football moment in our lifetimes where they spiked the ball in the end zone. Won the Big Ten championship, won a big bowl game, and voila, they were number 2 in the polls, or number 1 in the polls. And that was the year where he felt like, I think that was either that or 02, but I would probably say 85 was the best team that Iowa's had in my lifetime in football. And they had a chance. They went out to the Rose Bowl. UCLA had lost their last game. I think it was to USC. So they did not appear to be a formidable type team. And yet, we all know about Ronnie Harmon's 4 fumbles and drop touchdown pass. That obviously comes to the forefront. But also what doesn't get brought up enough is Iowa could not stop the run at any cost. I mean, Eric Ball, looked like Christian McCaffrey did, in 16. And so they lose 45-28. They finished 10th in the polls. But, that really, they were 3 going in and there was all kinds of movement. If they win decisively, Chad, they might have been the national champion. And yet that was as disappointing, I think, of a bowl loss that I can remember in Iowa football history.
Yeah, I'm glad. I mean, that's not on my list. I'm glad you included it though. I probably should have put something 85 in there. But yeah, you're right, because they could have finished at least 2 in the country probably. And the team was good enough to do it. Yeah, it's just one of those things. It's kind of like Iowa LSU women's like officiate. It's just like something that mars the game. Mars a big game for Iowa. The fumbles. That's the memory everyone remembers is all the Harmon fumbles and whether he was paid off or whatever. It just sucks to get to that point and then have to experience that and that be your memory of it, and still they haven't gotten that Rose Bowl, unless you were alive in 58, 59, which I know many of you are, but like, you haven't had that Rose Bowl, that would have been the Rose Bowl triumph moment probably.
Yeah.
That should have been. The other couple weren't necessarily expecting Iowa to beat Washington in 82 or 91, but 86 you probably were. Well,
right.
Good one.
And then number 1 is probably both of us, I think.
Yep, it is.
I'm
almost positive.
UNLV. Yeah.
Yeah.
1987. 20-point lead. Early in the second half, am I right on that? And
it was at least 18. It was 58-42 at halftime.
Okay, so it was
and
20.
Iowa loses 84-81.
It was 20 at one point. It might have been late in the first half then. And they lead 16, and let that thing slip away. Chad, that was, I would say, of the major sports, that was the best team Iowa's had. Better than 85 football, better than 02 football, better than 80 basketball. This was the team that could have won it. I mean, because if we remember, they had one of the greatest comebacks in Iowa sports history, going to Illinois and winning the top 10 matchup when they were ranked number 1. They, blew out Bobby Knight at Indiana at home, had 101 points. First time anybody scored 100 on Bobby Knight as a head coach was in 87. Started off, 19-0.
18-0, yep. 18-0. Lost to Jay Burson, Ohio State.
Oh,
yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, I don't know. Do you have anything much to add to this?
Oh gosh, I mean, I just remember. I remember this game vividly. And I went back and read an article from the DI that wasn't written that long ago, actually, by Brad Schultz. So he did a nice job on this. But just Iowa had 7 NBA players on its roster.
Yep.
I mean, you just go down the list between BJ, Roy, Eddie, Les Jepson, Brad Lohaus, Kevin Gamble. They had a team, and I mean this is definitely in my growing up in Iowa City, heyday of being a fan as a kid, and just like that was one of those days you just when they lost that game, you just go out, shoot baskets in your driveway for like an hour and a half. I know so many kids my age did that, and they're just like, when you get pissed and you just go shoot baskets for a while. And they blew the game, and then they still after all that, I just remember that guy in this UNLV. Do you remember this? Like the guy on the UNLV sidelines was like high stepping. The guy, I don't know. There was just like so much like. There's just so many like little memories in my mind from that game. And this is to go to the Final Four. And this is a team, and you're going to go, and Indiana ended up winning the national championship, and Iowa trucked them that year, as you said. So this is a team that could have won it all. They were number 2 seed, and they still had a chance to win. They forced a 10. Kevin Gamble hits a 3 to cut it to 1 with like 33 seconds to go ish. And then this is like old school. The clock's just still going, and they inbound the ball. And Iowa plays like pretty good defense, but just like before you know it, they get a 10-second call. So they get the ball back with 22 seconds left. And Gamble has the ball out. So they're down 1. Gamble has the ball out top. Lohaus is kind of open underneath for like a backdoor lob. And Gamble throws the lob like way over his head. I don't know what the play was. I was 13, so I didn't cover the team then. So I don't have all the info there. But it was just a bad pass, went out of bounds, and V makes 2 free throws. Iowa still had a shot to tie. Gamble misses the 3. Game over, season over, 30-5. Still the most wins in Iowa history by 4 over that 2022 team of McCaffrey's. So, the best, it's probably the best Iowa basketball team we've seen. I would say more than 80 even. I mean, it was... It was a really good team, and that was my number 1 gut punch. Yeah, still stings today if you're a Hawkeye fan.
Yeah, I mean it was 38 years ago, but if you're old like we are, old dudes, you do remember this that moment, and you remember that game, and it was a tough one. It was kind of like Bartman in 03 to some extent, if you're a Cubs fan too. But, Chad, it's probably time to switch things up.
Yeah, you guys stuck with us for an hour. You guys make it up to you here.
God, you're
sorry
down a funk, What are you trying to do?
I really apologize. It wasn't like the intent, but anyway.
Yeah. So let's flip things over to the ass kickings. Let's have some fun here. And Chad, I wrote down like 14 of these or something like that, but we wanted to document not the biggest wins, certainly in Iowa history. There are a ton of those too, but we wanted to chart the feel good ones. And you know what? Instead of working our way up, let's just start at number 1.
There you go. Go for it. Yeah.
55-24 Iowa over Ohio State at home. Nobody saw that coming. It's a shocker to the core. The funny part is, Chad, though, that Iowa had 6 guys who were drafted in the first 2 rounds on that team. They're a pretty good freaking team, a good collection of players. And Ohio State had 9, and they were not prepared for what they were about to receive. And they had no clue whatsoever on how to defend tight ends. That was proven. And, you can say what you want about Brian Ferentz, but he had one hell of a game plan for that. And he went through it point by point with me a few years ago. And he's like, we watched him over and over and over on tape, and we decided the first quarter we're just going to trade over tight ends, see how they're going to react, then see what they do when we run routes out of that. And he's like, by the second quarter we knew we got him, and then bam, 4 touchdowns to the tight ends. This is the ultimate feel-good moment, probably in Iowa history. Yeah. And it cost Ohio State a chance at the playoff because they won the Big Ten that year. But there's no bigger, more fun ass kicking in Iowa sports history than what happened.
There was Tyler Kluver. I mean, you had Polecat, the fake field goal called Polecat. It had it all. That game did. Josh Jackson with highlight interceptions. I mean, of all the offense, Jackson was probably the star of that game. And of course, Monty Hooker, NFL draft pick, still playing. Pick 6 on the first play of the game. I mean, that Ohio State was favored by 24, 21, 24. It was in the 20s. I mean, that's how big of a shocker this was. Iowa wins it by 31. There's the field storm. Definitely unexpected. And just one of those games where, like, you kind of, part of you just kind of kept waiting for Ohio State to come back, but Iowa just kept the pedal down. And I think that fake field goal was kind of emblematic of that. They just kept putting their foot down. Who had the big long run toward the end of the game? Was it Butler? No.
Yeah, well, both Butler and Wadley had long runs. But toward the end of the first half, it was Wadley.
Yeah, later in the game. Yeah.
Later in the game was Butler.
They just kept doing it. Nate Stanley, 5 TDs. Hawkinson, 2. Fant, 2. Kulik, 1.
Yeah.
There it is.
Yeah.
Definitely the Woodshed game. And that was, hat tip, Gazette, Mark Morehouse again.
Yeah.
Because were you at the Gazette then? No, he would have been Atlanta 10 probably.
I was Atlanta 10, yeah.
Atlanta 10, yeah, okay. All right.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
What else you got?
Well, let's kind of keep it in mind and go to another blue blood. And that would have been Iowa, Michigan at the Big House in 2002. Michigan was ranked 8th. And this was the coming to America game for Iowa. This was bullies of the Big Ten game. 34-9. It was the worst loss at that time at the Big House since 1967. And Iowa thoroughly, physically dominated Michigan in a manner that I don't think any of us expected when they went up there. And for Ferentz's best team, I think this was all right, we arrived. We're here. We're here to kick your ass. And Michigan said, okay, do it. They did it. And, it's en route to an 8-0 Big Ten campaign. And this was a statement game and a statement win, I thought, by Iowa. And again, ass kicking. Even if you win by a field goal at the Big House, you take it anytime you want. But to win 34-9, and it's really not even that close, I think that was a feel good moment for Iowa.
Yeah, you said it best. Iowa just arrived on the scene that day. Who was it? C.J. Jones, I think, had one of those bubble screen touchdowns early in the game.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was just a Bob Sanders. Didn't he force a fumble on a punt return as well, if I recall correctly? And it was close at halftime. I remember that, but then they really pulled away. Jermel Lewis, I remember having a big game. That was something else. And that was like, oh, man. Wow, Ferentz does have it going. And that was one of those, on the flip side of some of the basketball stuff we talked about earlier, like where you felt like the program going downhill. This was one of those moments where, oh, okay, this thing's going uphill now.
Yeah.
And they did 3 straight top 10 rankings, including that year. Obviously, you get to the Orange Bowl, and that was a little bit of a gut punch too, but we didn't rank that one. But it was a magical season for sure to get, Ferentz kind of carried off in the Metrodome that year, and with the Roses, it didn't go to the Rose Bowl, but
no, they should have. That was a tough one. That was Dirty Pool by the Orange Bowl. They fixed the rules after that because the Orange Bowl by count, lost the number one team to the BCS championship, which is the Fiesta Bowl that year. And instead of taking the team that they should have, which would have been the replacement for the Big East or even the ACC, they decided, no, we're going to take Iowa because we know they're going to bring 45,000 fans to South Beach. And the Rose Bowl's like, what? Because they lost the number 2 team. Then they grabbed Oklahoma to play Washington State. Now, I would have liked to see Iowa play Washington State, and in retrospect, that would have been better for the record too. But what else you got here?
A big memory for me would be 1990, Iowa 54, Illinois 28. They go into Champaign and just talk about an ass kicking. My God. I mean, this was the number 5 team in the country, and you just go into Champaign, and you're kind of like the Ohio State game. You're pulling out fake field goals. Matt Whitaker with a touchdown in that game. The political guy now. So, I've got some specific memories of that game personally because, so that was the day of my junior year state cross country. So I ran for City High, and we were supposed to win state that year. And we were ranked number 1, and we didn't. Our best runner just didn't have it that day. He was maybe going to win it. He ended up finishing 44th, and we lost by 28 points. So all he had to do was finish, 15th or 16th or better. Anyway, it was a really disappointing day for us. But then, I remember my parents telling me, oh, the Hawks are winning against Illinois, and that kind of made me feel a little bit better.
I remember it because my grandparents had their 40th wedding anniversary, and we had to go, and it was a Saturday night when I'm a junior in high school, and so wasn't exactly high on my list to go with grandparents and family to go have dinner at this small little town in Illinois. But I did watch a lot of the game, and I remember watching it in my room, and it's weird that we can remember some of these things, but I can't tell you what I ate for lunch or something like that. But the thing you have to add to this is this was when Iowa-Illinois rivalry was at a fever pitch in men's basketball. And it was after the Bruce Pearl, Deion Thomas situation, 75K and the Blazer and all of that. And that made it that much of a bigger deal. John Makovic, who is both the AD and the head football coach at Illinois, and he's trying to convince Iowa fans to come, and they're not going to get their windows broken and tires slashed and just, things like that. And for Iowa to start off so strong, I think they had a 31-7 lead or 35-7 lead.
35, right? Yeah. They scored on their first 5 possessions.
Yeah.
Including a halfback pass for a touchdown and a fake field goal. And I'm reading the UPI story right now. So
it was amazing. And as we say, you don't really want to watch any of the gut punch moments from before. You might want to, if you feel like you need something here, a strong brandy and a, and a YouTube video, go check out Iowa, Illinois. In 1990, that was a good one. So,
Nick Bell, Tony Stewart had over 100 yards each that game. Go ahead.
Yeah. All right. I'm going to go with one that didn't involve a ranked team, but I was there for it. It was the final game the Gophers played in the old.
Oh, yes.
55-0. And this was, if this game would have went on another 2 quarters, it would have been 84-0 or something like that. It was just one person I voted for Iowa in the top 20 and called it a seal clubbing, and I couldn't agree more. It was that destructive. Sean Green, the biggest hit of the game was by Sean Green on DJK. He was running, unabated down the field, and all of a sudden DJK gets kind of in the way, and wow, he got ran over and flew 15 yards in the air. This was epic, the way that they just hammered Minnesota. And part of that was, I think it was the week before, Minnesota put all its mental and emotional chips on the table to play Wisconsin. And we need to win the Axe and blah, blah, blah. And they lose by a field goal. It was a really good game. But then they were spent emotionally. And Iowa this is only a couple weeks after beating Penn State, which was number 3 and 9-0. And they went in there and they were rolling. By that time, They were as good as any team in the Big Ten. They had the most ferocious running game in the Big Ten and a great defense, and they slaughtered the Gophers. It was, like I said, 55-0. You play that another 2 quarters, you're talking 80-something to nothing.
I'll go back to the 2017 season. I know we're doing a lot of football here, but that's kind of what springs to mind in ass kickings. And Iowa goes into Lincoln, and speaking of clubbings, 56-14 over the Huskers. Noah Fant gets his Nebraska revenge. That was, talk about a game of, that was unexpected, because that was, I think it was tight, right, at half? Well, it wasn't like 7-7, like late in the first half. Yeah, it was 7. Nebraska was actually up 14-7, Scott. Yeah. And Iowa scores in the last minute of the half to make it 14-14. They ended up winning 56-14. They scored 28 in the third, another 14 in the fourth. Touchdown runs by Butler, Wadley, Torrin Young, and Ivory Kelly Martin in the second half of that game. And a Noah Fant 68-yard touchdown. Yeah. And wasn't that Frost's first year, too? Was that the first Frost game?
No, that was
the end of the Riley era?
Riley's last game. Yeah,
that's right. So the next year was Miguel Racino beat Frost in the first. Yeah, okay. Yeah. 56-14 in Lincoln, though. I mean, that's a butt kicking. Yeah.
I actually had the years before, 40-10.
Yeah, right.
At Kinnick.
Poor Mike Riley. Jeez.
Yeah. I know. And that's when they called it, a blood, they must have blood battles or something like
that.
Bloodbaths,
yeah.
Bloodbaths and, practice and stuff like that. So that was another one in there. And that that Nebraska team was 15th in the country in 16, because they started off like 8-1 or something like that, or 9-1, and lost their last 3 or 4 games or something crazy like that. So it was kind of typical Nebraska. Another one I'm gonna pick, though, and so I won't talk too much about the 16 game, is in 15 by the same score at Northwestern, 20th ranked Northwestern, 40-10, and this was each special season has a signature moment, and this was one of them for Iowa, because they were so injured. I mean, they had Sean Welsh playing tackle, moving out from guard to tackle. It was unknown if CJ Beathard would even play. Then they're down to their 4th string running back, guy named Akram Wadley, that they really didn't know, because all he did was fumble. And lo and behold, that they crush Northwestern and really put a stamp on their arrival as a pretty good team that year in 2015. So, and that just so happened to be the 20th anniversary of the 1995 Northwestern Big Ten championship team. So all of Pat Fitzgerald's friends were there, ready to celebrate, ready to beat the Hawkeyes again. And Iowa, as beat up as it was, with a walk-on right tackle and a guard playing left tackle, or vice versa, was able to really just blow them off the field and at Ryan Field, and I was really surprised about that.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we're getting into some recency bias here. I mean, I think our previous list had a lot of past stuff, but I don't know. Beating USC in the Holiday Bowl 49-28, or 49-24, I should say. That was an ass kicking, and that was not expected. We all remember the pregame show on Fox where all those, where Matt Leinart and Reggie Bush were just laughing and having a good time, and expecting USC to roll those poor slow guys from the Big Ten. And there were some good receivers on that USC team, that's for sure. My God, you could probably go through them, right? What did they have? Amon St. Brown,
Michael Pittman.
Yep.
Valus Jones. There's another one. Trying to remember.
But Amir Smith-Marset was the best of them all that day.
Yeah.
By a mile. Kick return touchdown, a rushing touchdown, a receiving touchdown, and almost had a passing touchdown in that ball game. And that game was probably most remembered for the Nate Stanley sneak. The 8-yard sneak. They just kept sneaking it because USC couldn't stop it. Yeah. That was very satisfying for all them in attendance. Drake London was the other big name you didn't mention. So.
Yeah, and Sam
Laporta. Yeah.
led Iowa in receptions that game as a true freshman. So he's had a nice little NFL career thus far. So I just got married. So congrats, Sam, on that. I'm gonna turn the wheel back about 40 years here, and I'm gonna go with 1984 Freedom Bowl, Iowa blowing up Texas 55-17. In Anaheim in the pouring down rain. Chuck Long throwing 6 touchdown passes. It was kind of a precursor to what we were going to see from Iowa the next year because, Chuck Long had already been an All-American quarterback at that point and wondering if he was going to go to the NFL and decided to come back. But this one was known mostly for Hayden Fry getting some needed revenge against his Texas compatriots there, and a lot of the staff that came with him from Texas, because when he was at SMU, it was kind of like what it was before the pay for play era, that they were really they were always put down, all the little guys from SMU, and now here was his chance to take on big bad Texas, and they annihilated Texas, and Fred Akers as head coach 55-17, and again set the stage for what took place the next year for Iowa.
You mentioned this one earlier on the basketball court, and it just sticks out to me in my memory bank, which was 87, just because they scored 100 on a Bob Knight team, 101-88, 1987. That was right after the Illinois comeback, I believe, right? So that took them to 18-0 or 17-0. And that was the team that won the national title. So like a Bob, think about like a really good, like a Nick Saban, beating a Nick Saban, putting up like a record total against like a Nick Saban in football. This was kind of like that in basketball. And that was, just emblematic again of like how good that Iowa team was in 87.
Yeah, that one actually, it was weird because they went from playing a 2-6 game at Purdue. Well, yeah, they went from at Illinois, which was 2-8. It was 2-6 at Purdue and won that one. Then it was 1-3 when they finally moved up to number 1 and beat Indiana. I mean, look at that stretch. They played 8, 6, and 3 and won them all. Yeah. And they were all good teams. Indiana won the national title. Purdue was like 15-3 in the Big Ten. Illinois was great, as they always are, especially back then. So that was, ass kicking. It was like 101-88. But it felt bigger just because of who was on the other sideline, and and when you're wearing that, crimson and cream, that's a big deal. Just for a little variety's sake, I'm gonna add. Got to throw a little Iowa State in here once. There's for Iowa fans, you kind of need that sometimes, and I'm gonna go with during COVID, when they played Iowa State men's basketball in front of nobody. So it's sort of like what we saw last. No, I'm just kidding. And this was 105-77, and of course it was Iowa State's worst year. So you almost can't gloat because they were 2-20 or whatever. But Luka Garza, 34 points, 13 of 14 from the field, 6 of 7 from 3. It was an unreal display that we saw from the player of the year that night in Carver Hawkeye Arena, and 105-77 against the Cyclones. So I thought that was definitely one to be mentioned here.
Yeah, for sure. I think one that if we wanted to do some women's basketball potentially,
sure.
The Ohio State game in the 2023 Big Ten title game when Caitlin Clark just went absolutely ballistic. I got to find the score because we're just kind of.
So 105-72.
Yeah. And weren't they up like, what was like the halftime score? It was like 60-24 or something like that. It was ridiculous. And I think I got to call up the box score here, but that was, that cemented Iowa as a 2 seed for sure. That season they made that run. They were a 2 seed in the Big Ten tournament, go on to just crush Ohio State in the title game. And of course they end up going to the final, or the national championship game later that year. So, quite a postseason run. I remember that tournament really vividly because it was Minneapolis, and in the semis, Iowa had gotten beaten by Maryland over in College Park really badly a couple weeks earlier, and then Gabby Marshall, I believe, hit 7 3-pointers in that game against Maryland. in the semifinals to knock off the Terps, and then put Iowa into the championship game.
Caitlin Clark with 30 points and 17 assists.
Yeah.
61-24 at halftime. Monica Zanano with 26 points. So Kate Martin with 13, and Caitlin also had 10 rebounds, so she had a triple double. So 30, 17, and 10. Pretty good game there. But that was one on my list too, and a couple more I'll add on the basketball side. I'll just throw two out there, and so we don't get too bogged down. Iowa beating Davidson in the 2015 Big Ten or the NCAA tournament, 83-52 is the biggest win by a 7-10 game in NCAA tournament history. And it was the first win that they'd had in the NCAA tournament since 2001. So it was kind of significant at that time to get a win, and then to win 83-52 against a team that a panel of experts from ESPN all picked Davidson to win that game. So I thought that was really impressive. And then I'll back it up by in 2021, Iowa went to its perpetual house of horrors in men's basketball, East Lansing, Michigan, and annihilated Tom Izzo, handed him his worst loss ever as a coach at home, 88-58 at the Breslin Center.
Yeah, I was going to mention one more basketball, just because probably one of the most memorable games that I covered ever, which was 16 at Michigan State. That was the team that was. I
was there too.
Yeah, that was Iowa was number one. I'm sorry, Michigan State was number one while we were at the Rose Bowl.
Yeah,
and Iowa beat them, but they didn't have Valentine in that game. Denzel Valentine did not play in that game in Iowa City. He was back for this game, and Michigan State was still fourth in the country. And Iowa, led by Peter Jock, Jared Utoff, Adam Woodbury, Anthony Clemens, Mike Gazelle, just put the beat down on the Spartans. And it's fun because at the Breslin Center, you still get to do this. At least most times that I've been up there, you get to sit courtside. So we were sitting courtside right by the Iowa bench, and it was just like, I just remember that game like, wow, like this Iowa team might be pretty good. And of course, they go on to, off to a 10-1 Big Ten start. They had won at Mackey Arena of all places right before that.
I know.
So
I was listening to that game coming back from the Rose Bowl. Because that was a crazy experience. I had to drive to Denver to fly to LA, and so I had to drive back. And so I'm like going through Western Nebraska listening to Rick Mountnight when they're down like 20, 21 points or something like that, and they come back and win at Mackey, and then they win in East Lansing, Chad. I mean, we were there for that. That was surprising. And the thing was, we bring up Michigan State quite a bit here with men's basketball. There, up until the last couple of years, Michigan State was the bully on the block for Iowa men's basketball. They just didn't know how to handle them under Fran very well, because Iowa ran a finesse up-tempo offense that got frequently knocked off stride by Michigan State, and they lost a lot of close games, and it was really pretty painful. But in this situation, that was a huge win at the time, and if the season, Chad, would have ended like the second week of February, it would have been a great year.
Yeah. Yeah, remember the game that year now we're going to the gut punches again, so I don't want to do that. Yeah. But at Indiana that year was kind of when it started going downhill.
Yeah, when they didn't? Well, no, that was
when they lost, yeah.
Yeah.
In 16.
Right. I've got a couple more football ones.
Go for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Let's finish it this way. Yeah.
Okay. One that I didn't, we weren't alive for, 1960, and this was Iowa Notre Dame, 28-0. And what was significant about that is the 1960 team was the best team in the country. It had some critical errors in losing to Minnesota up there. They had a snap that went over the punter's head. They had a couple other fumbles in the second half and lost a 1-3 game up there. But Iowa beat, I think, every single opponent but one. Notre Dame was ranked that year. They beat number 3 Ohio State 35-12, which also could qualify for this category. But they finished up until 1964. They always finished their year against Notre Dame. And this year against Notre Dame, they won 28-0 and stamped themselves as the best team in the country. Unfortunately for Iowa, that the Big Ten didn't allow multiple bowl teams until 1975. So they didn't get a chance to prove it. They would have. This was the best team in the country. And,
Wow.
but 28-0 against Notre Dame, even though that wasn't one of their best teams, it still feels probably pretty good for Iowa fans, those of whom may remember that game.
Yeah. Did you say you had one more?
I had two more that I can bring up,
Yeah,
and you can
go
tell
for
me
it.
Michigan State, Iowa football in 2010.
Yeah. There you go.
And after we had the gut punch game against Wisconsin, the next week, number 5 Michigan State, undefeated Michigan State, comes into Kinnick Stadium, and Iowa could not do anything wrong in a 37-6 victory. In fact, one of the best and signature plays of that game was Tyler Sash intercepting Kirk Cousins, then lateraling the ball. There's good old Tyler Sash. The lateral on the ball to Micah Hyde, who was better in the open field, and Micah takes it all the way in for the touchdown. That was, and even Kirk Cousins remembers that game. So, it was quite the win for Iowa. And then I'm going to wrap it up against one of their other big rivals, and that's Wisconsin, and it's the one we just saw last November. 42-10 over the Badgers, and the Badgers that day allowed 329 yards rushing against Iowa. And I sat in with George Barnett for several hours, and we went over a lot of different blocks. And I'll say this, that there might not have been a better blocked game in Iowa history than that, which in turn means that this is not the Wisconsin team we saw back in 2017, 18, 19, 14, whatever.
Right.
But still, to beat, and so what does Wisconsin do about it? That their defenders have 42 push-ups after every spring practice, because that's going to make them stronger when they play Iowa this year.
Yeah. Should be a good one up in Madison. I feel like it was a fun show. It was a good trip down memory lane. Hopefully you guys aren't mad at us for the first 57 minutes. But, like I said, you got to build the pain bank, to make these, the ass kickings and all that, feel better. But you can't just win all the time.
Yeah, I mean, you're not Ohio State, It's like, all the losses to Ohio State make the one time when you beat them by 31, it really feels, big and important, And now Illinois is a different game, but you can't take the context out of that time. I mean, they hated each other, and I can't describe how bad it was. And it was 5 versus 13. They both tied for the Big Ten title that year. There was a 4-way tie.
That's right. Yeah.
Iowa lost to their friends from Gopherland in the last game. But to do it the way they did it was amazing. And then same deal with Michigan, as we talked about with Ohio State. You lose all those games to that good program, that when you actually punch them in the face and you win that game, it feels good. So that's kind of why we wanted to balance it out, Chad, as they say. So.
Well, we wanted to give you an extra long show. I'm going to be gone next week. I think Scott's going to either go solo or have a guest. He's going to figure it out while I'm away. But you guys will be taken care of here on Legends and Listeners. And I'll be back in a couple weeks. Stay tuned for that. Only on Iowa Everywhere.